So I know that your organisation interviewed some 4 dozen journalists who experienced sexual assault in the course of doing their jobs. Is it a growing trend that we're seeing here, or is it just that we are hearing more about it now?
I'm not sure that we can actually say that it's a growing trend, but we can say that with the assault of Lara Logan in Egypt in February, a number of women came forward to tell us their stories. So between that and I guess we can point to the growing numbers of women working in the field at higher levels, and the growing awareness that there is sexual assault of journalists going on around the world. Perhaps it's not a growing problem, but it is a growing awareness that allows us to be talking about it.
Let me just quote something from Bruce Shapiro, who is the Executive Director of the Dart Center for Journalism and Trauma. He says, if we want to make journalists safe and effective, make it possible for them to do their jobs safely and effectively, we can only do that by confronting honestly the real risks that are present. So what exactly then do news organizations do in order to protect their journalists in the most dangerous of situations?
Well, I think that this report is prompting news organizations to examine their hostile environment training, which until now for most places has not included sexual assault or rape. A number of organizations told me that they are considering including such curriculum. So basically it would mean training journalists before they go into the field to be ready for some kind of assault and figuring out what they would do in response, but also creating an environment for when those journalists come home so that they are ready with a medical response and a psychological response.
Women, though, are not the only targets of sexual violence as well. What have you been hearing from male journalists?
I have certainly been hearing from male journalists, not at the same level of numbers that I've heard from women. But for instance, Lindsay Addario, who was kidnapped along with 3 other New York Times journalists in March in Libya, the media picked up on the fact that Lindsay was repeatedly sexually assaulted, but Stephen himself had written about the fact that he had been sexually assaulted. And nobody picked up on that until I spoke to him and asked him, you know, was this a big deal? What happened to you? And he said it certainly was. So I think that it is happening. Men are possibly more reluctant to speak out about it because of different social stigmas, but perhaps the media itself is actually not picking up on it too.
Why do you think that there is this culture of silence among journalists who go through this terrible trauma? You know, they're exposing the truths of other people. Why is it so difficult to do it for themselves?
I think journalists, we're not used to talking about ourselves. I think that there's not been a real culture of looking inward. I don't think media organizations have given the space for journalists to report these issues because, you know what, it ends up looking like possibly they're more vulnerable and weaker, and they fear that they could lose assignments if they report an assault or a rape. I talked to plenty of women who did actually come forward to report these things and were told by their managers that perhaps they wouldn't be sent back into the field, or actually they were pulled off of an assignment.
How important then is it for journalists to come clean if they've been through something like this?
I think it's extremely important. Press freedom means being able to report freely in any kind of environment, in any war zone. If we have journalists who are being kidnapped, killed, or jailed, you know, we at the Committee to Protect Journalists act quickly to help them. And as with any journalist who's been sexually assaulted or raped, it's also another way to silence a journalist. So we also, again, need to act to intervene in these situations.